I'm at Sydney International Airport right now, and I need to tell you something the travel industry doesn't want you to hear. Your Australian passport isn't as powerful as they claim. In fact, there are countries where it's actively putting you at risk. We're constantly told the Australian passport ranks 7th globally. Access to 185 countries, right? One of the most respected travel documents in the world? That ranking doesn't tell you about the 23 countries where Australia has issued Level 4 Do Not Travel warnings. Places where your Australian passport doesn't just get you denied entry, it makes you a target. And I'm not talking about obvious war zones. I'm talking about destinations where Americans can visit, Brits can visit, but Australians? We're specifically at risk. I've spent 6 months researching Smartraveller advisories, interviewing immigration lawyers, and tracking diplomatic incidents. What I've found will change how you think about that dark blue passport. Because while other Western countries negotiate exemptions and diplomatic protections, Australia's middle power status means we take positions that anger major governments. And they remember. Number 1 on this list, the government literally tells you, if you go there, you're on your own. Let me show you why. Number 5, Brazil. And yes, I know this seems random for a country blocking Australians. Until April 10th, 2025, Australians could visit Brazil visa-free. We'd been enjoying this since 2019. Then the government reinstated visa requirements, and it's a direct diplomatic message. Now every Australian needs to apply for an e-visa, $125 AUD, 5-year validity, but you need to plan ahead. Why the sudden change? 2 words. Diplomatic reciprocity. Brazil's foreign minister made this explicitly clear. Why should we offer visa-free access to countries that don't offer it to Brazilians? Brazilians visiting Australia? Visa required? Expensive? Bureaucratic. So Brazil said, no more one-sided arrangements. If you want our tourists to jump through hoops, your tourists can do the same. This affects Americans and Canadians too. It's not anti-Australian specifically. But here's what's interesting. It shows how emerging powers are pushing back against Western visa privilege. In 2024, Australian visitors to Brazil surged by 25% when the visa waiver was active. Now, tourism experts predict a 30 to 40% drop because of the hassle factor. Brazil isn't dangerous for Australians. But this is a preview of what's coming. More countries demanding reciprocity, not just accepting that Western passports deserve special treatment. If you're planning Rio or Sao Paulo, don't show up without that e-visa. The I didn't know excuse won't work at Guarulhos Airport. Number 4, Iran. And this one's heartbreaking because Iran is absolutely stunning. Smartraveller Level 4, do not travel. The highest warning level. And Australians are specifically flagged as high risk. Iran issues tourist visas. Europeans get them. Even Americans, despite all the tension, have pathways to visit. But Australians? You need a government-approved guide for every day of your trip. Pre-approved itinerary. Daily check-ins. Hotel monitoring. And even with all that, many applications get rejected without explanation. Why? Australia's intelligence sharing with the Five Eyes Alliance. Our support for US sanctions, our military presence in the Middle East. Iran sees every Australian traveller as a potential intelligence asset, and they've detained Australians. Academic researchers held on espionage charges, dual nationals interrogated for weeks. One Australian told me police showed up at their hotel at midnight demanding phone access. The Australian government can't help you in Iran. Our embassy in Tehran has extremely limited consular capability. If you're detained, you could be held for months before anyone even knows where you are. Europeans can explore Isfahan, Shiraz, Tehran with guided tours relatively easily. Australians? You're navigating a diplomatic minefield where your passport is evidence you're connected to hostile governments. I want to visit Iran. The history, the architecture, the culture, it's incredible. But the Australian government's explicit advice is, don't go. The risks are too high, and we can't protect you. Number 3, North Korea. And this is where things get really restricted. As of March 2025, North Korea is essentially closed to almost all foreign tourism. But even when it reopens, Australians face unique challenges. Australia imposes comprehensive sanctions on North Korea. Trade bans, asset freezes, travel restrictions. We're one of the most aggressive Western nations in enforcing UN sanctions. North Korea notices this. When they do open to tourists, they prefer Chinese nationals, Russians, and countries that don't actively sanction them. Australians? We're from a nation North Korea officially considers hostile. The few tour companies that operate North Korea trips told me Australian passport holders face extra scrutiny, longer approval times, and higher rejection rates than European nationals. One Australian tried booking a tour in 2024 before the borders closed. Application took 8 weeks, compared to 3 weeks for a German colleague. Then, rejected. No reason given. Australia co-sponsors UN resolutions against North Korea. We participate in naval sanctions enforcement. Our military works with South Korea and the US. From Pyongyang's perspective, every Australian is connected to hostile forces. And even if you could get in, Smartraveller's advice is crystal clear. Do not travel. The risk of arbitrary detention is extreme. Communications are completely controlled. You're at the mercy of a regime that views Australia as an enemy state. Tourism to North Korea was already restricted, guided tours only, controlled itineraries. But Australians face the additional burden of diplomatic hostility. When tourism resumes, we'll be among the last nationalities welcomed back. Number 2, Russia. And this is where your Australian passport becomes actively dangerous. Level 4, do not travel. But here's what makes this different from other warnings. Russia explicitly considers Australia an unfriendly nation. That's not diplomatic language. That's an official designation. Russia maintains a list of unfriendly countries, and Australia is on it. What does that mean for travellers? Arbitrary detention. Australians have been held on fabricated espionage charges, interrogated for days, denied consular access. And Russia doesn't care about international pressure. 2022. Australian couple detained at Moscow airport, held for 72 hours, interrogated about their phones and computers. Their crime? Having an Australian passport and visiting during sanctions. Australia imposed massive sanctions on Russia after Ukraine. We expelled diplomats, banned imports, sent military aid to Ukraine. Russian authorities see every Australian as a Five Eyes intelligence partner. The Australian embassy in Moscow is functioning, but barely. They warn, our ability to provide consular assistance is extremely limited. If you're detained, we might not even know where you are. Your credit cards don't work. Visa and MasterCard are blocked. Your phone might be searched at the border. Hotel staff report foreign guests to authorities. You're under constant surveillance. And here's the real danger. Russia uses detained foreigners as diplomatic bargaining chips. An Australian in a Russian prison isn't just unlucky, they're leverage in negotiations. Commercial flights are increasingly disrupted. Exit routes close without warning. Australians have been stranded trying to leave when airlines suddenly cancel routes. Russia isn't accidentally hostile to Australians. It's deliberately making us examples. One detained Australian sends a message. The West's sanctions have consequences. Number 1, Afghanistan, and this is the most dangerous place an Australian passport can take you. Level 4, do not travel. Terrorism, kidnapping, armed conflict. And for Australians specifically, we're high-value targets. 20 years of Australian military operations in Afghanistan. Over 40,000 Australian personnel deployed. Combat operations. Intelligence gathering. Support for the Afghan government. The Taliban remembers all of it. And they consider Australians enemy combatants, even if you're just a tourist with a backpack. Western nationals face kidnapping risk in Afghanistan. But Australians are specifically targeted. Why? Because ransoming an Australian gets international media attention and potential government negotiations. The Australian embassy in Kabul is closed permanently. There is zero consular support. If something happens to you, the Australian government cannot help. you're genuinely on your own. Aid workers, journalists, researchers with valid reasons to be there, even they face extreme danger. But tourists? If you arrive with an Australian passport claiming to be a tourist, you'll be suspected of intelligence gathering. Exit routes are unreliable. Airports can close without notice. Land borders to Pakistan, Iran, Tajikistan all require permissions that take weeks or months. You can get stuck. Every security expert I spoke to said the same thing. Afghanistan is the highest risk destination for Australian civilians. Not because it's universally dangerous, though it is, but because Australians have a 2-decade history of military engagement. The Taliban government doesn't issue tourist visas to Australians under normal circumstances. The few Australians who've entered recently, humanitarian workers, former diplomats, operate under heavy security protocols. I researched this list expecting to find bureaucratic visa issues. Instead, I found Afghanistan, where your Australian passport makes you a kidnapping target worth 6 figures on the black market. Afghanistan isn't just restricted for Australians, it's actively life-threatening. The government's advice isn't cautionary, it's absolute. Do not travel under any circumstances. So, here's what these 5 countries tell us about the Australian passport. Brazil shows us the future. Emerging powers demanding reciprocity, not accepting Western privilege as default. Iran reveals the cost of Australia's Five Eyes membership and Middle East stance. North Korea demonstrates how comprehensive sanctions create travel barriers. Russia proves that middle powers get targeted when they take strong positions. And Afghanistan? It's the legacy of 2 decades of military engagement. The Australian passport is powerful, but that power comes with political baggage. We're a middle power that punches above our weight diplomatically, and some countries resent it. Beyond these 5, there are 18 more countries with level 4 warnings. Places where Australians face terrorism risk, arbitrary detention, or complete government collapse. Does this mean the Australian passport is weak? No, we still have visa-free access to 185 destinations. China just extended our visa-free stay to 30 days. Europe, Americas, most of Asia, we're welcome. But we need to be honest about the exceptions. These aren't random travel disruptions. They're deliberate consequences of Australia's foreign policy choices. Before you book international travel, check smartraveller.gov.au. I know it sounds boring, but these warnings exist for reasons documented with detained Australians and diplomatic incidents. If you want to know about the other 18 Level 4 destinations, or the dozens of countries with Level 3 reconsider travel warnings, drop a comment and I'll make that video next. And tell me if you've faced issues with your Australian passport anywhere. I'm researching a follow-up on countries with unofficial restrictions, visa delays, extra scrutiny, random questioning. Subscribe for honest travel information for Australians. Not generic advice that pretends all Western passports are the same, but specific issues we face because of our diplomatic positions. The Australian passport is powerful. But in 2025, power means choosing positions that some governments remember. These 5 countries prove it.